Hi, and welcome back to another AnyRPG Development Livestream. In these videos, I livestream the development of the AnyRPG Engine, a 100% free and open source role-playing game engine designed in Unity and written in C#. These videos are unscripted and give you a chance to take a behind-the-scenes look at the unfiltered, methodical side of software development. For more information on AnyRPG, be sure to check out AnyRPG.org, where you can find documentation on the engine, links to the full source code at the official GitHub repository, and downloadable versions of AnyRPG Alpha, a free game designed to showcase the features of the AnyRPG engine. If you would like to see more of this content in the future, then be sure to subscribe to the Cohesion YouTube channel or just leave a message in the comments telling me what you would like to see. In today's episode, we will be refactoring probably quite a bit of code because we want the ability for NPCs to be able to sheath and unsheath their weapons. Currently, any NPC that has a weapon basically either has it hard-coded in his hand or he just leaves it on his back and ignores it and goes around punching things. So we're going to improve that behavior a little bit, but to do that, we just need to make some modifications first to our animation profiles because we have a minor issue where now that we've given our player character the ability to sheath and unsheath his weapons, we need to add the ability to separate animations for combat and out of combat. So let's just take a look at that for a second. So I've got my staff in my hand, and the most obvious one here is going to be, or not in my hand, on my back, the dragon blade, this nice big two-handed sword here. So standing here, it's fine. You can see, he's just doing his idle pose here. But as soon as we start running, he's like moving his hands in front of him. And same thing when he jumps right here. See that? He's holding the thing up as if like he would be in combat. So we don't want that. We want him to basically do the same kind of run as if he was unarmed. So if I take the sword off here and put it away, you'll see that when I run, I actually do a proper run. And this is the run that I want him to do. Same with the jump here, with his arms sort of out and stuff. So to do that, all we need to do is just make some changes to our animation profiles. So I'll pull up the two-handed sword animation profile here just so you can see. So we have this combat idle and we have the regular idle, and that's great, but if you look at basically everything else here, we don't have combat versions of these particular clips. And that's what we want because we just want the unarmed versions of these clips playing when you're not in combat. So we're going to open up the animation profile here, and pretty much for everything here, like we've got idle, we need combat idle. Let's see, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to copy like this entire block here. Death clip and revive clip don't really matter. I don't know, stunned clip. We might want one of those as well. Like a combat version of it. Levitated, not really. I'm not really sure what's going to happen if an enemy has in their hands a weapon in their hands and we have these effects on them, but the one we're most concerned about for now is basically just the move effects. So essentially what we need to do is take all of this stuff right here, right down to stunned, and just make a copy of it, and then just put the word combat in front of it. Okay, great. So that's got all those in there. And then we need to basically add properties for all of those. So we'll just do quick actions and refactoring and let Visual Studio create all those for us. And I'm just going to actually move these ones to the top. Move forward fast, move back. Just because usually these are the ones that we're dealing with when we're dealing, I think there, I need to grab those ones. Most of the time, most weapons won't have all these other animations, so the ones we're most concerned about and usually going to be editing first is basically just these movement clips. So I'm just going to move all the movement clips up to the top right after the idle clips basically. And I'll put the combat idle down with the combat ones, so then basically we have all of our combat ones together. Yeah, perfect. And then we've got these three, which are basically just going to be the same no matter what. And these are going to be definitely our most commonly used ones, so they're right at the top. And oh, you know what? We need these as well. We need combat versions of those. Jump, fall, and land. And then that means we'll also need properties for those as well. And then we're just going to go down and rename all these so that they match our naming scheme. And the reason I'm doing this is because a lot of times you'll make a small lowercase version of something, and the uppercase version of it might actually be a class name. And so when you hit property, sometimes your property will actually get named the same as your class name, which isn't what you want. So this just eliminates that happening just by keeping this naming scheme for our properties throughout. And then there's basically no ambiguity. So that looks good. And then all we need to do is just find our references to these, because that's where we're going to be actually setting those. No. Interesting. There we go. Okay, so this is our character animator script right here, and this is where we set our animation clip overrides. And so what we need to do now basically is take and set all the combat versions of these as well. So we have a jump clip, and we'll need to do a combat version of that jump clip also. And basically we'll need to do that for pretty much everything. And in our override controller, this is the name of the animation. So we'll just be sure, going into our animation controller, it's just rebuilding right now. Okay. So here's our AnyRPG character animation controller, and our in combat jumping is right there. So interesting. This is the in combat jump, and it's using the same unarmed jump animation. These are getting replaced. Yeah, okay, so basically AnyRPG unarmed jump, so it's just going to replace that particular animation with these. We're going to actually, I think, have to fix that, because if you look at in combat movement here, no, those are all the unarmed ones as well. Okay, so if we look at out of combat movement, okay, right, because unarmed, yeah, okay, sorry, I'm just getting confused by the naming scheme here. Right, so unarmed basically means like in combat, but like with your fists. So that's good because, right, if we look at this regular jump here, oh, right, I didn't have a good jump and fall animation, so I was actually using the unarmed jump and the unarmed fall and the unarmed land, which were the in combat versions of the jumps. But with the movement, it's not like that. Okay, so we might have to change that, and I might have to try to find some better jump animations for that, because when we use the animation override controller, we're overriding like the name of the animation itself. Or are we? unarmed fall, unarmed jump flip, and unarmed land. And those are okay. That's actually these names right here. Okay, just looking at this, actually, it looks like, okay, so for the in combat version, it looks like yeah, okay, well, that works actually. So for the in combat versions, I'm actually referring to the original unrenamed versions of those animations. And for the out of combat versions, I'm referring to the renamed versions of those animations. So that's okay actually, because what I can do then is I can basically just copy these animations right here and just rename them and give them slightly better names and make sure that the names are different for these animations and the other ones. So that's okay. Let's do that right now then. So this unarmed jump here, we can rename that to in combat jump basically. So we'll make a copy of it so we've got the original parameters there, and then we'll rename this one to AnyRPG in combat jump dash unarmed. I think that's a better name for it. And then that's good. We're not using this animation, so we don't need to worry about that. So for unarmed fall, we'll do the exact same thing. We'll just make a copy of it right here. Set that, oh perfect. We don't need to change anything there. And what we'll do is AnyRPG in combat fall dash unarmed. Good. And now we'll do the same thing here so that we have some better names for this stuff here. Unarmed land, and we will make basically a copy of that. Oh, jump was supposed to be 1 to 20. I think that's the problem. Yeah, there we go. That looks a little better. And this was, I think I just copied the wrong one accidentally. Let's try that again. So jump should have been 1 to 20 because it was a backup of jump. That's better. And land is 21 to 34, and it's actually land that we want to make the duplicate. No. Oh, I see. When you hit plus, it just automatically copies whatever was on the last there because you can't actually duplicate these. Okay, that's better. So this is actually going to be AnyRPG in combat land unarmed. There. And we're we're going to be doing frames 21 to 34. Okay, there. So jump is 1 to 20 of this animation slice, and land is 21 to 34. Good, and we can apply that. Okay, good. So now we've got, okay, just a second. This unarmed land. We want that to be AnyRPG in combat land unarmed. Okay, good. So now we've got better names here. Unarmed combat fall unarmed, combat land unarmed, combat jump unarmed. Good, because unarmed is basically our basic state of combat. Okay, until we apply weapons and overrides. Okay, that's better. So now we've got some better names for these. And actually, I think I might do the same for this. I want to rename that. Actually, we don't even need really in combat. We just need combat. So combat idle unarmed. And AnyRPG combat straightforward unarmed. Same thing here. Oh, you know what? Actually, I think unarmed is supposed to go first, because if I look at my two-handed sword animations, I think I've been just wanting to make sure we stay with the same naming scheme here. Two-handed, yeah, okay. So we'll use combat, and then to keep with the naming scheme, unarmed first, and then the swords. Okay. So we'll just change that back really quickly here. So unarmed goes before idle. And same thing here. And that looks good. And then we just need to add the word combat on all these. Okay, great. So now these are all renamed nicely. So when we look for them, they'll have nice logical names for us to replace. And I'm just going to go back really quickly and fix those, because we don't need the word in before combat here. As much as I'm a fan of nice long descriptive names, there is a point when some things are just redundant. So we've got those renamed, and then we'll do the same thing for these ones. And the same thing for those ones. Oh, right, because that was part of the one. Those both came from the same slice. Okay, good. So now we've got some nice names to replace. And when we look at our animation override controller here, let's just take a look at what it's showing now. So that's good. Everything that needs to be replaced in the combat animation sets now has a nice combat rename or combat name before it. So those are the names that we'll be looking for. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to take the dashes out of there. Those aren't really necessary either, because we're not really using them. And that's supposed to say fall, not full. And actually, you know what? I'm just going to move unarmed to the beginning there, because that's the naming scheme that we use for all of our movement ones. And then I'm going to do the same thing for these ones right here. Just put unarmed before jump and remove the dash, so that way everywhere we've got the names the same and we don't have to like do any translation or anything like that. Okay, good. So now I'll take another look at the animation override controller. And there. Okay, good. So now everything has a nice naming scheme. We know exactly what they do. We have this idle neutral. Now I'm not seeing our combat idle there. Let me just take a look at what that is. Combat unarmed idle. Am I just missing it when I'm looking at this controller? Oh yeah, there it is, right there, right in between fall and jump. Okay, good. So that looks good. It looks like we don't use that one. And I'm still keeping it in the controller in case I decide to like implement ninja flip jumping, but it's not in use for now. So now if we go back to our script, now we've got some nice easy names that we can use to properly rename these. So this was AnyRPG Combat Unarmed Jump, and this is my Combat Jump Clip, and just going back in and making sure that's what we actually named it. My Combat Jump Clip. Okay, good. So then I think I renamed the combat one to AnyRPG Combat Unarmed, idle. And we'll do the same thing for the land. We'll put the combat version of that. And we'll need to do the same thing for the fall. Okay, so now we have combat versions of fall, land, idle, and jump. We don't need one for death. Let's see, we've got a my move back clip over here. Stunned and levitated are there. I'm just going to move these around so that they're more consistent with what we've actually got, like in the order in the controller. So I'll just put death down here. We have death, stunned, and levitated. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. So then now this is where we get to replace the rest of the clips. So right here, what we're doing basically is this is where we're overriding both the combat and non-combat versions with the same clip from the animator right now. And so what we'll need to do here, we have we're setting these animation speeds here. So we'll need to do a little bit of work here. First, we'll need actually combat walk and combat run animation speeds variables. We'll need to be keeping track of those. Actually, I guess we'll need to actually be keeping track of the combat version speeds for everything here. So let's just put all those at the bottom so we can just copy that whole block. And what this block of code is for basically is we need to compensate for the speed of the animation and tell the animator basically what speed it should be playing this thing at based on our actual movement speed. Because for example, like if our fastest run animation has a run speed of 3.5 meters per second, but our character is moving at 10, he's going to be basically skating across the ground because we're not using root motion. So that means we need to tell the animator to play at some multiple of that in order so that the animations line up. So what these variables are doing basically is they're just keeping track of just in combat animations. These are basically just keeping track of what the actual speed or the velocity encoded in the animation is. And if there is no velocity encoded in the animation, then these default values are the values we're just going to assume that that animation has. They're not always right. In fact, they're actually mostly wrong, but we do need some default values to work with. So then we'll go down and we'll just find all references to that because there's the place where we're setting it right here. Okay. So what we need to do basically is we need to copy this block of code right here, and then we'll switch that out with the combat version of it. We don't need to set the combat version in there. We don't need to set the non-combat version there. And then we need to basically set these combat versions. Okay, good. So then we need to basically do the exact same thing for this. We need to make a copy of it that is only overwriting the correct animation that it needs to. Okay, good. And then we pretty much need to do the same thing for all of these. So I will just copy, it looks like actually this entire block of code here. Actually, first I'm just going to take this move back clip up here just to be consistent with what we've got elsewhere, because we just had the forward, like the direct forward and back movements up here. And I'm just going to take a look at this move back clip right here, because is unarmed move back really the clip that I'm using for that? If we look at just wait for this to recompile. If we look at out of combat movement here, the one I'm actually doing is AnyRPG walk backward, not unarmed walk back. So it looks like that might have actually just been a typo in there or something. And let's just take a look at the override controller. Yeah, so AnyRPG walk backward and walk forward. Okay, so this should be actually walk backward. And then it'll replace the correct animation, it looks like. And then this is AnyRPG combat unarmed move back. Okay, and now we can do that. That's interesting. These ones are replacing all of the old out of combat, or all the old combat versions. Right, of course, because basically when you equip a weapon, yeah, actually that makes sense, because when you equip a weapon, the only ones that you really should need to replace are the combat versions of things. Okay, so we'll still replace both of those, just because it keeps the controller a little more flexible. So we'll be replacing the combat and out of combat versions of all of those things, just in case we ever need to do, or use them in the future. Okay, so my strafe back was the last normal one. Okay. So then this should actually, this my strafe left clip here, since that's the out of combat one, we just called these walk strafe whatever and jog strafe whatever. And the jog ones are these outer ones at the higher speed, and the walk ones are the ones in this inner circle at the lower speed. So let's go in, and this was, for example, my walk. Whoops. Right. It's only called right there, AnyRPG walk strafe left. Yeah, and then, okay, so we'll do the same thing for, oops, no, that was just AnyRPG jog strafe left, walk strafe right, jog strafe right, and then walk strafe forward right. Oh, looks like we actually have an issue in there. That's actually supposed to say jog strafe. Okay. And then walk strafe forward left. And then we're going to do the same thing for jog strafe forward left. And then with the backs, we only have walks for the backward animations, because you pretty much, like, it's really hard for a human to run backward at the same speed that they walk backward. So that's why we only allow basically fast movement in a forward or sort of sideways direction currently. It would be pretty easy to change that if we ever want to. So these ones now are basically the combat versions of these. So everything below here, I'm just gonna combat and out of combat. So we'll just go up to make some combat versions of everything. placing these like this for now. Okay, so this looks good, my combat stuff. And wow, we have like 4 more to go still. Okay. Okay, good. So now we have all those. And what we need to do basically is just look for where we're setting this speed right here. So we'll find all references to that. Okay, so this is where we're setting the velocity here on the animations. And just looking through this, pretty much what we need to do is we need to, I think, basically make like in combat and out of combat versions of these, because previously we were only allowing for one version of this. Yeah, so where we're setting these, we need to figure out if the character is in combat or not. And it looks like, I'm just looking at this, and it looks like we've got this stuff being set right here in set velocity Z. And it looks like actually there's a little bit of difference between our calculations here. So I'll have to take a look at that. Let's actually just see, is anybody actually calling that? Yes, absolutely. That is being called, and let's just see where that's being called from. So this function set velocity is called right here in our controllers, basically our movement method. And that other set velocity is being called in our character motor. Interesting. We might have to do something about that because we might be getting actually like incorrect velocity values being set on our animator. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. We'll take a look at that in a second, though, because first we have to deal with this whole like combat versus out of combat thing up here. So what we want to do basically, we need to see the characters don't necessarily, you know what, okay. This, no, I was going to say this method is currently only called from like a character controller that applies only to player characters, whereas that character motor's velocity methods are being set from a character motor which is on everything, NPCs and player characters. Not everybody or everything in the game, I don't think, necessarily has a character combat component. So we'll need to check for that. And we've got a reference on this animator that's going to let us know, who are we here? I think it's our character unit we refer to. Yeah, because we need a way to refer back to our character. So character unit is our reference. Okay, so oops, I'm just spelling that wrong. Character unit dot my character So we've already got this variable here called used, so we can't use that. And we have these base run and base walk. Use base animation speed. Okay, so we can then if you're in combat, then your used base move forward animation speed equals that right there. It actually doesn't, but we'll change that in a second. Otherwise, if you're out of combat, then it equals that right there. Perfect. So then this is actually where we want the combat ones. Okay. And then we just need to make a float for it. Okay. And then we pretty much need to do the same thing for everything else as well. So we need to do a statement like that. Right, and of course, and we're in combat, because this only applies if we're actually in combat. Okay, good. So if we're in combat, we are going to be using the combat animation speeds that we got from the animations earlier. And if we're out of combat, we're going to be using the out of combat versions of those. So now we just need to make variables for all these. And this will be the used base jog strafe left animation speed, I guess. And this will be the used. Oh, no, that's actually going to be the used base strafe left animation speed. Okay, and then we will need a used base strafe right animation speed. Then a used base walk strafe back right animation speed. And then the same thing for back left. And then he used base, strafe forward left, and strafe forward right. So now we have forward left, back right, left, right, forward, and back. Perfect. So now all we need to do is set these values based on whether or not we are in combat. So these ones are the in combat, and these ones down here are the out of combat. Okay, good. So then I'll just, after I do all these, I'll just replace them all with the non-combat versions of them. We have used base walk back, and this one was strafe right. No, this one was strafe left. And then we need to do the same thing for strafe right. And then the same thing for walk, strafe, back right. And walk strafe back left. same thing for strafe, forward, left. Oops. Finally, same thing for strafe, forward, right. Okay, so that should give us what we need basically to ensure that the correct values are being used for whatever animation speed we need in basically whatever direction we're moving. Yeah, okay, good. So now the only thing left is this little bit right here. This little set velocity Z right here. It looks like it's actually using a different calculation. And I'm just wondering if there's a reason for this to exist, because like I really don't like having different code in two different places. Because here, the way we're setting our Z velocity is much different. Here, basically, anything less than or equal to 1 gets set to the base walk animation speed. But if you're moving at a velocity greater than 1, you're going to get set to the base run animation speed. And if we look at our AnyRPG walk back animation, I just want to see what our velocity is on that. Oops. So if we look at this, it's got a velocity of minus 1.6. So when we move backwards, if we're running back, I think we're going to be using basically the wrong multiplier. If we ever use this right here. And actually, even sort of the same thing over here. Okay, let's see. So in here, what we're doing is at any move backward, we're using the base walk back animation speed, which is exactly what we want. Because we literally, we only have a single base walk back animation speed. So what this is telling us, basically, this little bit right here accounts for sideways movement. So essentially, as long as we're not sort of moving back on a 45, if we're actually anything 22.5 degrees off center and our Z velocity is less than 0, we're going to use our base walk back animation speed, which is exactly what we want. But if our velocity Z is getting set by the character motor there, then we'll essentially be taking like that -10 value right here. The use base animation speed is going to be the base run animation speed, which is actually the base run forward animation speed. So this code is just like, it's messed up in so many ways. Because our base run forward animation speed is going to be 3.4. So then what will happen is we'll be doing like 1 over 3.4 times 1.6, I think, which will give us an animation speed of like 0.4, which will then multiply by 10. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, okay, so I don't really know what's going on there. This was like really, really old code. Let's just see if we can replace this with this other method up here. Because if we can, okay, so when does this code get run? This code gets run all the time on fixed update right here. Okay, so let's just try replacing this with that other code, because that other code is doing like accurate calculations, the code that we just edited here. So we'll just set velocity rather than set velocity Z. This has got to be a new no, wait a minute, just vector 3.0. Okay. I was always wondering, I had like this issue where when I was walking backwards, it kind of looked to me like the character's feet were moving too fast. I mean, at least when you were running. And this may have actually potentially been the issue. We'll figure that out in a second though, and we'll see if this works. I hope it works. I think it'll work, but we're really going to have to confirm that. And it looks okay, everything compiled, no errors in our console. So let's jump back into the game and see if that worked. Oh, wait, before I do that, I'm just going to stop and I'm going to save, because I think we made some changes. Oh, what was that OK button? Try that again. Save. Okay, no OK button this time. We made some changes to some scriptable objects, and we always want to save after we do that, because if the Unity editor crashes, we'll lose them. And I've literally lost like 3 hours of work before because that happened once. It wasn't fun. So let's go to play and load game. And we're going to load Wizards RS over here. Okay, now let's just see what happens here. So he's got the staff equipped. You know what? I didn't actually go in and change his animation profile. That is something that I'm going to need to do. So if I look at the bone staff, he has the human staff attacks animation profile. Okay, we need to go into all of these animation profiles here, because basically all these clips here move forward fast. Yeah, so basically we just need to take this and we need to move it down to the combat move forward fast clip. And then we can remove the move forward fast clip, setting it to none. And I believe what will happen there is now it'll just use the default. So let's just see. Okay, so we have combat unarmed strafe left. So we'll want to remove that and move that down to the combat strafe left. And null out that one. And then the combat strafe right. And then same thing for combat strafe forward left, combat strafe forward right, combat strafe back left, and combat strafe back right. Now you'll notice maybe that I'm putting the unarmed clips in here right now, and that's just because, let's see, does home work for this? No, this window does not accept the home key. We have to slam on page up. Okay. And that's because basically I just don't have animations for holding a staff and moving in that direction, or I just haven't spent the time to find them yet. As I continue development on this, like I literally have thousands and thousands of animations that I downloaded, especially because of that huge mocap library. So there's a lot of them to look through to find appropriate animations. Okay, good. So now all of our combat clips are finally down here in our combat section, and anything up here in the non-combat section does not have the word combat in front of it. So hopefully, let's just test that out here. And let's see if we can get our character moving with some better animations. Okay, and we have our first issue here. I see. I just literally I forgot the word combat in one place here. Okay, so I'll just close that down here. And try to run that again. Okay, so let's see when we run now. Oh yeah, there we go. That's better. Now we are finally getting the animation that we want when we run. Just make sure that our speed looks okay. I don't see any foot skating. That I think looks like about the speed we want. I don't have movement speed clipped going backwards right now, so we're moving backwards at 3.5 meters per second. Actually, you know what? Let's just take a look and see. Take a look at the animator here. So I've got. Let's open up the animator. I'll just add a window animator here, and then what I'll do is I will find our character here. He's here under the player units, and if I click on this, I see his animator. Perfect. And I'll just pull it over into the window here for a second. Okay, good. So what we're wondering about here is this animation speed. So when he moves back, let's just take a look here. So out of combat movement, and he's going to do basically this walk backward movement right here, which has an average velocity of negative 1.6. So since we are moving backwards at an actual velocity of 3.5 or 3.4 something, we should expect to see a multiplier 1.6 over 3.4? No, 3.4 over 1.62. 2.125. Okay, so 1.6 times 2.125. Okay, perfect. So we should expect to see an animation speed multiplier of approximately 2.1, which will cause the legs theoretically to be moving at about the speed that our character is moving backwards at here. So let's just watch that animation speed. 2.2, perfect. So we know that that's working properly. If we run forward here, you'll see our animation speed is 1, and that's because basically our forward moving animation, if we take a look at it here, AnyRPG jog forward. Let me just pause that again. I think we're missing a window here. I can open up that, and I can click on that. There we go, AnyRPG jog forward. So if we open, here's that animation there. So you can see the forward velocity on this animation is 3.4, and since we're basically moving, if you look at our character panel here at 3.5 meters per second, our animation speed is 1 because our forward animation matches, but when we move backwards, it speeds it up. And just zooming in on his feet there, looks pretty good. I don't think I'm seeing any foot skating, so that's good. And then basically we can just test this by hitting Blessing of the Makers, which will move us up to 10. And you can see my guy's like super fast going forward and super fast going back. But what we would expect is that our animation speed moving forward is going to be about 3 something. 2.9 makes sense because we're moving, and then 6.2 moving backwards. So if we take the native velocity of 1.6 on that animation and we times it by, what was that value, 6.2, we get 9.92, which is about 10. So this is great. We have our animation speed basically lining up perfectly with our movement speed so that our character's feet are not skating across the ground while we're moving. And this is basically how you handle non-root movement with animation multipliers. So this is great. I'm looking around here. My character is properly doing the, whoops, what am I doing here? There. So forward left, left, back, back right, left, back right, right, forward right, forward. Okay, great. So he's properly doing the right animations that he needs to be doing. So let's go get him in combat here. How can I get him in combat? I hit this guy with weakness. There we go. Now, these animations aren't great, but whoops. That's actually just because I haven't set up fantastic animations for him. Let's just let him respawn so we can watch those combat animations again. Okay, good. So, yeah. It's because I'm using those unarmed combat animations. You can see like my character's basically holding his fists up. So that's okay. All I have to do now is swap out those for good animations and we'll be good to go. So for the rest of this, basically all I'm going to be doing is, if we look at that staff attacks here, actually, you know what? Let's do one more really quick test. Where's that staff attacks? Click X and it'll open with the right one. Okay, there. So basically, I just need to go in now and fix up the animation profiles for the two-handed sword and move all of these two-handed sword animations down to the combat stuff pretty much. And I'm going to do that like for the mace and the sword as well. And I'll be doing that for the unarmed animation profile. But this is basically just going to be a bunch of me moving animations down. So I'm not going to bother recording that because it's probably just going to be like 45 minutes of silence while I just move things back and forth. You've seen pretty much everything that you need to see in this episode for what we've actually done on the code changes. So talking about code changes, we did make some code changes. So what we're going to do here, I'm not going to do a version bump yet because I'm actually going to jump back on and do another recording very soon for using these animation profiles to allow NPC characters to swap their weapons in and out. But we will upload this code to GitHub because we want to keep this commit basically separate from any other changes that we do. So let's just make our commit now. And so what we did basically is we separated in and out of combat animation overrides for weapons. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Awesome, so that code is sitting there at GitHub, and as always, if you would like to see more of this type of content in the future, just subscribe to the Cohesion YouTube channel or let me know in the comments if you'd like to see anything different. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you guys very shortly, probably in about an hour or two, And at that point, we will be adding the ability for our NPCs to sheath and unsheath their weapons. And I'm just going to change the title on this one because we didn't actually get to add the equipment manager. So when you see this, this will be named Development Livestream 8, something about animations. All right, take care. See you guys in the next episode.